poor girl saved a billionaire's life, only to be betrayed in front of the world. "Don't you dare leave me." Those were the words whispered by a dying billionaire as his body gave way in the heart of New York. Crowds passed by, blind to his struggle, until a poor girl, still smelling of coffee and grease from her midnight shift, knelt beside him with trembling hands. Two worlds collided. The man who had everything and the girl who had nothing, bound together in a single breath between life and death. What would you have done in his place? Welcome to Emotional Echoes, a channel where emotions come alive and every story leaves a lasting echo in your heart. Please subscribe to Emotional Echoes channel. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so more souls can feel these stories. Stay with my video till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far this story spreads. Now, let me share with you the truth hidden beneath this fragile encounter. It was a cold winter morning in New York, the kind that made every breath turn into white mist in the air. Central Park was quiet except for the steady rhythm of Richard Hale's footsteps as he ran along the path. He was a man who carried the weight of a billion-dollar empire, yet in that moment, he was just a tired soul running away from loneliness. Suddenly, his chest tightened, his vision blurred, and his body collapsed onto the frozen ground. Emma Brooks had just finished her long night shift at a diner, her eyes heavy but her heart racing as she hurried through the park to get home to her sick mother. She noticed a man lying motionless ahead. Without thinking, she dropped her bag and knelt beside him. His lips trembled, his skin pale. He whispered with desperation, "Please, don't let me die." Emma's hands shook, but she pressed on his chest, counting under her breath, fighting the panic rising inside her. "Stay with me, sir. You're not alone." The sound of her breathing mixed with his gasps for life filled the empty park. Her fingers fumbled, but her training from a community nursing class guided her. She tilted his head, gave a breath, then another. She could feel how fragile he was, how easily a life could slip away. Her heart pounded harder with each second. She thought about her mother waiting at home, depending on her. Yet here she was, fighting for a stranger who had nothing in common with her world, except the simple fact that he was human and needed saving. The wail of sirens cut through the morning air. Paramedics rushed over, quickly taking over, their practiced hands moving with speed and precision. One nurse asked her to come along, to give details as the first witness. Emma's eyes filled with conflict. She wanted to stay, to make sure he lived. But she thought of the pills her mother needed at that very hour, her fragile chest that could not wait. "I'm sorry, I can't," she whispered, backing away. She picked up her worn-out bag and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only the echo of her trembling voice and the man she had just pulled back from death. Richard woke to the steady beep of machines and the dull ache in his chest. The room spun slowly, the air too bright, too sharp. He tried to piece together fragments of memory, but all he could recall was a pair of trembling hands and a soft voice urging him not to give up. That voice had been desperate, real, clinging to him when his body had wanted to let go. The door burst open and Vanessa rushed in, her makeup smudged as if she had been crying for hours. She clutched his hand, pressing it to her chest, her voice breaking. "I thought I lost you. I was there when you fell. I called the ambulance. I saved you, Richard." The words tumbled out between sobs, rehearsed, yet convincing. Richard blinked at her, confusion tightening around his ribs. He wanted to tell her it wasn't her voice he remembered, not her touch, not her breath keeping him alive. But weakness silenced him. She leaned closer, whispering that fate had put her in the right place at the right time, that love had guided her to him. He searched her eyes, hoping for truth, but only found determination that left him uneasy. Still, he let himself believe, because doubt felt heavier than surrender. By evening, the headlines had already spread. Billionaire rescued by loyal partner. Vanessa's photo filled the screens, smiling, celebrated as a hero. Richard stared at the images, his heart twisting. Something didn't fit, but his strength was drained, and the world already believed her. He closed his eyes, letting the lie wrap around him like a blanket, while the echo of a stranger's voice still whispered in the back of his mind. Emma sat on the edge of her worn couch, the television flickering in front of her. She watched in disbelief as the news anchor repeated the same story, praising Vanessa as the woman who saved Richard Hale's life. Emma's chest tightened, the images stabbing like knives, because she knew the truth yet had no voice to claim it. At the diner that night, her manager stormed into the back room holding a stack of receipts. He accused her of stealing tips, his voice cutting through the air like glass. "Poor girls like you always find ways to take what isn't yours," he barked, ignoring Emma's pleas. She tried to explain, but the words meant nothing. He shoved her final paycheck across the counter and told her not to come back. Emma left with trembling hands, the humiliation burning deeper than the cold outside. When she returned home, the pounding on the apartment door came almost immediately. The landlord stood there, arms crossed, demanding rent that she did not have. "Pay up or get out," he sneered, spitting the word poor as if it were poison. His footsteps echoed down the hall as he left her standing, with her head bowed and tears falling. Inside the tiny apartment, Emma held the small bottle of medicine meant for her mother. She placed it gently on the table, her hands shaking, her heart drowning in anger and despair. Her voice cracked as she whispered to herself that she had saved a man's life, fought to keep him breathing, yet the world crushed her as if her kindness meant nothing. She pressed her forehead against the cool wall, feeling it all break inside her. A life pulled back from death, and still she was treated as if she were invisible. Sophia sat quietly at the corner of the hospital room, her small hands clutching a worn sketchbook. She had been there when the paramedics wheeled her father in, and she had seen the young woman with brown hair pressing hard on his chest. The memory was clear to her, fixed in a way her mind often held details others missed. When the television praised Vanessa as the savior, Sophia's eyes narrowed and her voice, soft but firm, broke the silence. It wasn't her. "I saw the other woman." Richard turned toward his daughter, startled. His heart softened at the rare moment she chose to speak so directly, yet doubt clouded his thoughts. He wanted to believe her, but Vanessa was already holding his hand, shaking her head with practiced sorrow. She leaned close and told him Sophia was confused, that children with her condition often mixed up reality and imagination. Sophia's gaze did not falter. She repeated her words, each one careful and certain. She described the woman's trembling hands, the way she leaned down to breathe air into his lungs. But before Richard could respond, Vanessa's voice cut sharp across the room. "Stop this, Sophia. You don't understand what you're saying. You'll only upset your father." The girl shrank back slightly but did not look away. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her silence heavier than any argument. Richard felt torn, the weight of Vanessa's insistence pulling against the quiet truth in his daughter's eyes. He reached for Sophia's hand, but the moment passed, swallowed by Vanessa's stern glare. The truth had been spoken, yet no one allowed it to take root. And in that fragile room, the only person brave enough to challenge the lie was a child the world refused to believe. The ballroom shimmered with gold light, every chandelier blazing against polished marble floors. Applause rolled like thunder as the host announced Vanessa Cole as the woman who saved Richard Hale's life. She stepped forward in a glittering gown, smiling with practiced grace, her hand linked tightly to Richard's arm. Cameras flashed, catching every angle of her triumph. Emma moved quietly among the guests, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. She kept her head down, her black server's dress blending into the shadows. But fate never allowed shadows to stay hidden for long. Vanessa's gaze locked onto her, and a smirk slid across her lips. She drifted close, voice sharp and cutting beneath the music. "Look at you, carrying drinks while I stand here as the hero. Do you feel it? Every time you see me by his side, does it sting?" Emma bit her lip, gripping the tray until her fingers ached, her throat too tight to answer. Suddenly, Sophia broke free from Richard's side. The girl darted across the glittering floor, her small hand reaching for Emma's. Her voice, trembling but fierce, rose above the crowd. "She's the one. She saved my dad." Silence swept the room, broken only by the gasps of startled guests. Every camera turned. Emma froze, her eyes widening as the weight of every stare pressed on her shoulders. Vanessa's mask cracked, her voice sharpened into a scream. "Stop lying! You don't know what you're saying. Do you want to humiliate your father in front of all these people?" Guests whispered, tension sparking like fire in dry grass. Emma's tears burned hot as she tried to pull away, but Sophia clung tighter. Richard's heart pounded as he watched. His hand trembled around the champagne glass he hadn't touched, the liquid inside quivering with his doubt. He wanted to silence the chaos, to protect his daughter, but his voice faltered, stuck between Vanessa's fury and Sophia's truth. Emma finally tore herself free, whispering that it was enough. She turned and hurried past the chandeliers, her steps echoing through the stunned ballroom. Richard half raised his hand, as if to call her back, but let it fall, his chest heavy with confusion. Sophia's cries still rang in his ears. In that moment, with his hand shaking and his voice lost, the lie held stronger than the truth. Vanessa's smile at the gala had barely faded before she began planning her next move. She hired a shadowy team to spread stories online, painting Emma as a gold digger who had latched onto Richard for money. Fake posts filled forums and social feeds, with strangers repeating lies until they sounded like truth. By the next morning, Emma's name was smeared across gossip sites as if she were a predator. Emma walked the streets with a folder of resumes, stopping at small offices and cafes, begging for a chance to work. Each time she saw recognition flash in the manager's eyes, her heart sank. They had read the stories. They had already judged her. "Sorry, not hiring right now," they would mutter, and doors kept closing before she could even explain. By the end of the day, her legs ached and her spirit felt hollow. At home, her mother noticed the weight in her eyes. Olivia took her daughter's hand, whispering through shallow breaths that people could take jobs and dignity, but they could never take away the truth. Emma knelt by the bed, tears spilling as she confessed she felt invisible, as if her act of saving a life had turned into a curse. Olivia stroked her hair and told her to hold on, because the storm could not last forever. That night, Emma returned to their apartment building carrying groceries she could barely afford. She stopped cold at the sight of her front door. Thick, black letters had been scrawled across the wood. "Stay away from Richard." Her hands trembled as she traced the paint, her chest tightening with fear. Someone had followed her. Someone wanted her silenced. Inside, she locked every bolt and sat beside her mother, the echo of those words searing into her mind. The darkness outside pressed closer, and for the first time she wondered if the price of telling the truth might be her safety. Dinner at the Hale mansion began in silence, but the weight of lies pressed harder than the silverware on the table. Sophia sat stiffly, her fork clattering against the plate before she pushed it away. Her small voice cracked the air. "I saw her. I saw Emma with her hands on your chest. She saved you." The room froze. Richard's breath caught as he looked at his daughter. He had heard her whispers before, but never like this. Vanessa leaned forward, her tone sharp and dismissive. "Stop, Sophia. You're confusing yourself. Don't hurt your father with stories." But Sophia slammed her palms against the table, her tears spilling, her voice breaking again. "It was Emma. I watched her fight for you when no one else was there." The conviction in her eyes shook Richard to his core. He excused himself later that night, long after Sophia had cried herself to sleep. In his study, the shadows stretched long across the room as his aide laid down a file. Richard pressed play on the emergency call recording, his heart hammering in his chest. Then came the voice, Emma's voice, trembling but determined, echoing through the speaker. "This is Central Park, by the north entrance. He's not breathing. Please hurry, please." Her breaths were ragged between words, the sound of compressions faint in the background. "Stay with me, sir. You're not alone." Richard gripped the desk with both hands, his eyes stinging, the sound slicing through every layer of denial he had built. It was undeniable. The woman who saved him was not the one beside him now. It was the stranger who vanished before he could even know her name. His body shook with rage and regret, the truth cutting deeper than his near death ever had. He whispered to the empty room, raw and broken. I trusted the wrong person. I hurt the only one who gave me back my breath. Richard asked Emma to come to his office, his voice heavy but gentle, as if each word carried the weight of guilt. She sat across from him, her hands clasped tight. Unsure why she had been summoned, he began to speak, to thank her, to tell her he now knew the truth. But before he could finish, the door burst open and Vanessa stormed in, her heels striking the floor like gunfire. She pointed at Emma with venom in her eyes, spitting out accusations. She wants money. She threatened to ruin you if you didn't pay her off. Emma's face turned pale, her breath caught in her throat. Richard slammed his palm on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. Enough. I have proof. It was Emma who saved me, not you. Vanessa's mask of charm cracked, twisting into rage. Her voice rose into a scream as she called Emma a liar, a thief, a nobody who would destroy the Hale name. Security rushed in, and Richard, with cold authority, ordered them to escort her out. She clawed at the air, shouting that he would regret this, that he was throwing everything away for a girl from the gutter. Her words echoed down the hall as she was dragged out, leaving behind only silence. Emma stood frozen, her legs trembling, tears threatening to spill. She whispered that she should leave, that she never meant to bring chaos into his life. But then Sophia rushed in, wrapping her arms tightly around Emma's waist. Don't go. You're the only one who told us the truth. Her small voice pierced through the storm, binding Emma to the moment. Richard watched, his heart breaking at the sight, knowing this fragile girl had become the anchor both he and his daughter needed. The press hall was packed, cameras flashing in restless bursts. Reporters leaned forward as Richard Hale stepped up to the podium, his suit sharp, but his expression somber. His voice carried through the noise, heavy with something raw. For weeks, the world has celebrated a lie. It was not Vanessa Cole who saved me. It was Emma Brooks. Gasps swept across the room. Reporters shouted, but Richard raised a hand, silencing the chaos. He paused, scanning the crowd, then gestured toward the side of the stage. Emma, please come forward. For the first time, she stepped into the blinding lights. Her worn black dress seemed out of place against the polished backdrop. Her hands trembled, as if the weight of the entire city bore down on her. The contrast was striking. The billionaire stood tall, but the young woman beside him looked fragile, overwhelmed, her eyes darting as microphones stretched toward her. Richard placed a steady hand on her shoulder. This is the woman who kept me alive. While the world looked away, she gave me back my breath. I let others take her truth, and I will never forgive myself for that. His words cracked, not with weakness, but with the weight of confession. Emma swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. I never wanted credit. I just wanted the truth to matter. Her knees nearly buckled, but then she felt a small hand slip into hers. Sophia, chin lifted, eyes steady, whispered loudly enough for the microphones to catch. She's family now. The room softened, flashes slowing, reporters lowering their cameras as if even they recognized something bigger than news. Outside, headlines began to change. Emma Brooks, the true savior. Vanessa's name disappeared from the spotlight as quickly as it had risen. For the first time since that morning in Central Park, Emma felt the crushing weight of lies lift from her shoulders. In its place grew something fragile but real: justice and the quiet hope of belonging. Weeks after the press conference, Richard made an announcement that surprised even his closest advisors. He was creating a foundation dedicated to children on the spectrum and to women struggling with poverty. The first name he placed on the leadership board was not his own, but Emma Brooks. She hesitated at first, afraid of stepping into a world that had once humiliated her. But Richard looked her in the eyes and said he wanted her compassion to guide the work, not his wealth. Emma accepted, not for recognition, but because she wanted to turn her scars into something brighter for others. She walked through community centers, spoke with mothers who reminded her of Olivia, and saw children who reminded her of Sophia. Every moment reminded her that the pain she endured had a purpose now. She carried the weight of those nights of fear, but also the strength of having survived them. The foundation grew, fueled not by money alone, but by a vision of healing born from injustice. One Sunday morning, Richard, Emma, and Sophia walked together in Central Park. The air was crisp, the same path where fate had first crossed their lives. Sophia skipped ahead, then stopped suddenly. She turned back, her eyes shining with a rare clarity. "Thank you, Emma," she said, the words simple, yet carrying all the weight of her heart. It was the first time Richard heard his daughter speak gratitude so freely, and it broke him open in the best way. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she knelt to embrace Sophia. Richard watched them, his chest lighter than it had been in years. A single act of kindness had not only saved his life, but had rebuilt his family. And as they continued down the path, their steps side by side, it felt like a quiet promise. Sometimes, saving a stranger is not the end of a story. Sometimes, it is the beginning of a future no one thought possible. From a single moment in Central Park, where a poor girl pressed her trembling hands against a billionaire's chest, came a journey that changed lives forever. What began as desperation turned into truth, healing, and the rebirth of a family. This story reminds us that love, compassion, and the courage to do what's right can bridge every divide. If this story touched you, share your feelings in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, and help spread this echo of humanity. Please like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes so more hearts can feel these stories. Thanks for listening.